Babe. Babe. Are you done? Yum lemmy. Are you done, lemmy? If you hear any noise in the background, it is my pigeon. He is a little pigeon named Belok, and he is a magnificent pain in the ass. So my apologies in advance. All right. Hello, hello. Welcome back to yet another wonderful afternoon with me. I'm filming this on the first day of the spring semester. It was fun. It was nice. Anyway, I think I had a pretty great first day. I think everyone else did too. So that's always fun. Always good to get back into the professor fit and get back into that good learning. Good to be on a normal schedule again too and actually like wake up at a regular time. Christ. But hello, welcome. We've got some fun stuff to talk about today, mostly with these thick, chunky text right here. Before we get into all that though, if you are new here, welcome. Hello, my name is Sara Stresen. I am a Christian witch and educator, as you now know, a content creator, a writer, all these many different things, and also a Christian witch. And me and my friend Mimi wrote this book right here, which you can grab pretty much anywhere you can find a book, Amazon, my website, anywhere like that. But this book right here, if you haven't already checked it out, is a wonderful one-stop shop that quite literally is like the opening door to anything about Christian witchcraft. If you heard that term and you said, what the hell are you talking about Christian witchcraft? This book pretty much gives you the 101 overview. I've also written other books like Where the Gods Left Off, and also some fantasy works like The Glass Witch and its sequel, The Wraith Queen. And you can find, of course, that and all my content and a whole lot more on my page. So if you have not already, do in fact go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like this video, and ring the bell if you want notifications for whenever I post. And remember, you can also join my Patreon and get all of these videos 2 weeks early and ad-free, which is pretty cool, I will say. Moving on aside from all of that, yes, in fact, we are here to talk a little bit about this book. And also, I guess, technically, this book, because it is all one and the same there. But when it comes to the Bible, a lot of people have a lot of questions about it. They'll ask things like, do I need to read the Bible as a Christian witch? Am I not allowed to do anything until I start reading the Bible? How do I read this thing? How do I make sense of all of the stuff going on in here? How do I reconcile with the absolute wild narrative that is playing out in front of me on these pages? Because let me tell you, it gets a little rough. Okay, there is some trouble in paradise at times with the old story of the Bible, I'll tell you that. And so today's just a bit of a shorter video, a little shorter conversation on my honest advice for how you might start getting into the Bible. So let's address some of these questions. So first question, do I need to read the Bible to be a Christian witch? This is one of those questions that's just kind of like, it sounds maybe a little counterintuitive when you hear it, but actually it does make a lot of sense for folks to ask this, because there are so many denominations of Christianity where people really aren't encouraged to like actually read the Bible, but more just to kind of follow along with like whatever sections that their pastor or priest is putting up, whether it be in liturgy or, I don't know, just on whatever it is the non-liturgical denominations want to talk about that week. I don't know how they do their stuff, but you know, every week, of course, you will see some scripture, right? If I look at the Episcopal lectionary calendar, they're going to have those specific ones and those specific chunks, and they usually have some relation to like the time of year that we're in, right? So right now we are, I believe, in Epiphany. So right before Lent, right after Epiphany, we are now here in this part of the story of Christ. Once we get past Pentecost over there in the spring, that's when we start getting back more to the Old Testament, the story of the people of God, right? So there's all that kind of stuff going on, and it's very nice and it's very fun, but obviously you won't really get the full story if you're only relying on like the occasional snippets you get from liturgy. You know what I mean? So yes, when it comes to being a Christian witch, of course you want to read the Bible, because that's quite literally your entire basis for even beginning to get to know the character of God. And if you don't know the character of the God that you claim to follow, it's going to be really easy to have other things try and sneak in and pretend to be him, and you won't be able to tell because you don't have any knowledge of who he is and is supposed to be to begin with. I mean, just think of like any show or book that you really like where you're really attached to the main character. If someone says, yeah, I love that character, and they start describing a completely different character that's not even in that book, because they never read that book that you love so much, with the character you love so much, what do you even do? You can't have a conversation. You can't do anything functional with that because they don't know about the book and the character. Likewise with magic, I mean, you really want to know as a Christian witch, as a Christian alone, but especially as a Christian witch, who are you talking to? Right? We remember these scriptures over here where they tell you to test the spirits, discern the spirits. Paul also mentions discernment as one of the gifts of the Spirit. If you never actually investigated the character of God, you're gonna have a hard time pinning down who it is you're actually talking to at any given point. And I don't think I need to explain why that could get dicey. So, squared away, yes. Yes, you do in fact and should read the Bible as a Christian witch. And now this is something that obviously it's going to take a long time, and we'll get into more of that in a bit, but it's not a task you're gonna do in a day. It's not like you have to know the whole thing in and out perfectly in order to consider yourself a Christian at all, never mind a Christian witch. Which does lead us into our next question. Do I need to read the whole Bible before I start doing Christian witchcraft? I would say no, not any more than you would need to read the whole Bible first in order to be a Christian, right? There are some basics you should know. Don't get me wrong. Like, if you read nothing else, read the 4 Gospels in the book of Acts. Read also the first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament. It's actually the Jewish Bible. What Christians call the Old Testament is just the Jewish Bible. Obviously, Jewish people don't have the New Testament, which probably makes it pretty weird that I'm holding up a book called the Jewish Annotated New Testament. But this is just Jewish scholars looking through the Gospels and the epistles of Paul and pointing out like, hey fam, all of this stuff is rooted in this. You can't quite fully grasp or appreciate this if you don't know this. So these are scholars going through bit by bit and explaining how a lot of stuff Jesus is saying and Paul is saying are based in Jewish values, in Jewish tradition, and Jewish religion, which is something I think a lot of people take for granted, but that's a story for another time. So, as a Christian, like if you're just starting out, I would definitely read the Gospels. In fact, you can even read just one. That's definitely something you could do in like a day or two. Just read the Gospel of Matthew. And if you're feeling real spicy, the Gospel of John. That's a good starting point to understand like what is going on with Jesus and all that later, right? Once you're finished with those Gospels, maybe take a look at the first 5 books of the Bible, like Jewish Bible, Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers. Those are the first 5 here. And really, you can get a good sense of what's going on just with Genesis and Exodus. If I'm being totally legit, like you can get a pretty decent grasp of what's going on. You still read the whole thing, but if you need to have a crash course in like God and Jesus, Gospel of Matthew, maybe Gospel of John, Genesis, Exodus, there you go. You can read that in like a week or 2. You can do that. That's fine. But of course, again, the reason you want to know those before you start Christian witchcraft is so again you can get that character of God. So that when you feel a presence come around, you can hold what you know from this up to it and say, does this match? Is this energy I'm feeling at all aligned with what I am picking up on about God here or here? Or is this something so out of left field that I don't even want to engage with it another second? And of course, also, when we talk about the Bible, as you can see, it's kind of massive. The Jewish Study Bible alone, this is like over 1,000 pages. And the New Testament really kind of comes together in about 300-400 pages. And this isn't even including the Apocrypha, which is a whole separate tome of this series that I have over there. There is so much of the Bible. And this is definitely where I'm saying start small, but remember and endeavor to continue reading the entire thing. So I'm, in fact, as you can probably guess from the tabs, I'm kind of going on a bit of a journey myself, you know, like rereading this whole thing and really picking up on certain things, especially the more I learn and grow as a Christian witch, the more books I read like these, the more I just want to revisit things in the Bible and go back to all of these scriptures that they reference, you know, in the God of old, in misquoting Jesus and magic and Christianity and all these places, and see exactly what it is they're talking about. And there is something to be said for the fact that the more you read the Bible, the more you get out of it, right? Just like say when you're watching a movie, when you watch it for the first time, yeah, you get the story and that's really cool. When you watch it a second time, there are some extra things you don't notice that now you do notice because you know what the ending is. You can kind of see now how the ending relates to this scene that you didn't quite understand before. The more you watch the movie over and over, the more of these little details you notice, the more of, you know, the complexities you notice, the more of the foreshadowing and character development you pick up on. And the same thing happens with the Bible. The more you read the Bible over and over, the more you're like, oh, interesting. I didn't notice that before, but that is a very interesting secret. That's a very interesting bit of mysticism we can pull out of that, right? And so, as you go on and you continue reading, this is definitely where we have to talk about how to read the Bible. Now, this is a place for a lot of debate, honestly. There are many different ideas of what the Bible is and what it means and how everyone should view it from multiple different denominations, right? So there are some denominations that go super duper hard and they're out there insisting that the Bible is the infallible, unchanging, never altered, perfect and pure Word of God. And then there are others like myself who understand the Bible to be Southwest Asian, Semitic, Abrahamic, whatever term you want to pop on it, mythology. It is a mix of mythology and history, right? Because there are a lot of genuine historical accounts in here. Things like, you know, being exiled to Babylon, all these different tribes kind of running in and trying to invade this area. There's a lot of history in this because it's spanning, this alone spans about 1,500 years, and this spans about, say, another 100 or so. That, of course, there's going to be real moments going on. There's going to be real situations, real political and socio-political, you know, issues being talked about. But there's also a lot of mythology by virtue of the fact that we're dealing with the supernatural. And the supernatural, that at the end of the day, that is mythology. That's how that works. There's Norse mythology, Greek mythology, Celtic mythology, and there's Abrahamic mythology. And that's okay. It doesn't necessarily make it untrue. And this is something that we really need to recognize, that very much across many different cultures, especially ones like Greek, like Norse, like Slavic, they understood their myths to be true without being literally true. So things didn't need to literally actually happen to be true or to convey some kind of truth. And that's the way that I look at the Bible. There's a lot of things that we even maybe have consensus didn't actually happen. For instance, the whole, you know, fleeing from Egypt thing in Exodus. A lot of scholars are starting to say, we have absolutely no reason to believe that actually happened. The Egyptians have no record of it. If anything, it might have been the other way around. It might have been Semitic cultures coming into Egypt and causing trouble. Who knows? It very well, you know, could have been just like folklore. We don't really have any record of Moses existing. We can't find any archaeological or anthropological evidence that Moses existed, you know? So Abraham and Moses become these kind of like legendary figures, these mythological figures that were supposed to represent real people, but we don't have actual evidence existed, you know? So there are many ways to look at this. The scholarly view that just views it purely from an anthropological perspective, right? Like we have with Francesca Stavrokopoulou here. We have that more mythological, you know, anthropological folklore view that holds a lot of mystic significance, that understands that all the stuff going on in here, it's a genuine for like telling of the encounter of these people with God, but a lot of it might be metaphorical, allegorical, and not literal in that way. I mean, think about it, right? We've got Jonah living in the belly of a big fish for 3 days. That did not literally happen. You cannot tell me that some dude was just chilling in the belly of a fish for 3 days, literally. Those are the things where it's like, this is obviously some mythology that might have represented or dealt with a real event, right? When he goes into the city and says, hey, you're all screwed if you don't repent. But we know that you can't survive in the stomach of a creature for 3 days. Like, that's physically impossible. Like, we know that. So... But first, so when it comes to reading the Bible, you have to decide how it is you want to look at the Bible. You have to decide what the Bible means to you, what it is. Again, for me, this is an awesome, like, user manual to the character of God. This is an awesome user manual for magic. I mean, in this are the Psalms, and the Psalms are amazing for quick spells because they are songs and poems that make excellent cantrips. Cantrips being spoken or, you know, just kind of written spells or charms that don't require any other materials, tools, or items to work. We also get a lot of really good life lessons, right? Like if we look at any of Jesus's parables or lessons or sermons or anything, and we look at Paul's epistles, there's a lot of really good life lessons. I mean, I think Matthew 6:24 to the end of the chapter is like some of the best stuff. In fact, I frequently use that section of Matthew for kind of like financial security spells. I can't even really call them money spells because I'm not trying to get money. I'm just kind of reminding myself that God sees what I need when I need it, and putting that trust in him to say, okay, hey, God, you know what I need to stay financially stable, to, you know, be well, please do so, right? Matthew 6:24 to the end. Solid, rock solid, so good. But once you decide how you want to look at the Bible, now you can decide, okay, how do I want to read it? What way do I want to read it first? And what I'm talking about plainly is, do you want to read the Bible, like the actual Bible? Do you want to read it all once, just blind? No notes, no nothing, just as it is, like in these little tiny pocket Bibles that are just the Bible text, no explanation, no nothing, just translated text? Do you, maybe, I don't know, want to read it and really scour every inch of it first and really take your time working through each part? Maybe you want a study Bible that has like all the footnotes that tell you exact context of what's going on and why, and gives you some introduction to each part. Do you want to do that? Or do you want to first experience the story and only the story? This is an option. This is how I first read the Bible. I'll tell you, I started trying to read just that King James version, that KJV baby, and I fell asleep within like 2 pages. Because between the way it's written and just the pacing of the way biblical writers were writing, it's not like the most narratively compelling stuff. I'm not going to sit here and act like it's riveting, you know. I mean, there are certainly parts that get spicy, especially when we get with the prophets and everything, everyone just going crazy and having war and subterfuge and crazy stuff. But even then, it's just not written in that way that like typical, you know, trade books are written, right? It's not exactly like the most insanely entertaining stuff. And one might argue, well, okay, the Bible is the Bible. It doesn't need to be entertaining. Sure, but let's be so for real. If it's putting you to sleep, it's going to be hard to read. The end. Like, there's no way around that. There's really none. So I first read it as a novel. And it was it was this book. It was big, it was chunky. And I felt like kind of bad because, as you can see here, 1,500 years in 1,000 pages. One man's 30-year story in 200, right? So the ratio is a little crazy. There's obviously a lot of emphasis put on Jesus. There's also all these epistles from Paul, which are literally just Paul's letters to certain churches, and like, you know, him going off on them for doing stupid stuff. So I felt bad when I was reading it as a novel because you know, there's like a good chunk of like all the story leading up to Jesus, and then bang, the rest is just the story of Jesus. It felt kind of disproportionate, but also understandable, right? We had a lot to get through. Still, what struck me when I read it as a novel was exactly that, was the story, right? Specifically the humanity of the situation. So, of course, you know, we got all these rules and stuff, especially, oh my goodness, I just finished reading Leviticus. Oh, so many rules and strict things and like very repetitive chapters because they're very explicitly and specifically lining out the rules to the letter on every single thing. That's a lot. It's very hard to get through. It's very difficult to stay engaged. But when you're reading the story and you're getting all those emotional beats, right? Those moments of shock, right? When someone does something absolutely wild. For instance, the entire story of Sodom and Gomorrah and everything Lot did and everything Lot's daughters did. Whew! When that is made into a actual, like, typical narrative like you would read in fiction, it's just got you sitting at the edge of your seat a little bit more. So personally, I recommend anyone who wants to just get familiar with the story first, read the Bible as a novel and really feel those emotions, connect with these figures in the Bible, and appreciate just the journey that God's people and Jesus all go on. That's my first thing. But second, right, definitely, if you just want to read it for the sake of saying you read it, just grab any old Bible and go ahead and read it. I would recommend not doing that, or if you are going to do that, to mark any passages that you don't understand and you aren't sure why they say what they say, because what you really want to end up doing is getting these good study Bibles, the ones that have the introductions to each chapter that tell you when they were most likely written, who they were written by, what they go over, that, you know, tell you a bit about what to expect and what to look at and what the point of it all is, as well as all of the in-text footnotes from, again, biblical scholars who study this stuff for a living, to tell you, hey, yeah, this here references that, this here is implying this here is about this cultural practice that isn't explicitly mentioned, but is very clearly shown in other cultures in the area. Like, these footnotes are great. I would recommend reading that, and, you know, getting one of these, so you really understand what's going on, and you can get way more context and be way more informed about a culture that existed hundreds of years ago, right? Things have changed so much, and people take this for granted that you can't just pick up the English translation of the Bible and perfectly understand it. You need to have someone who can explain to you why people thought this way, spoke this way, acted this way, why no one batted an eye at certain things that we would consider insane, right? Like, you also, again, you are going to need other scholarship as well. You're going to need outside books. You're going to need books that cover things that are not talked about in the Bible alone, but draw on all of those references to those other situations going on. So, like, this book, invaluable because it really points out the fact that Judaism was not created in a vacuum, that we can very clearly see, like, where God's originating from and how he is kind of developing in the minds of what became Judaism and later Christianity, right? This is great context to have as you read this, because it makes that next question, how do I square all of these horrible things I'm seeing in the Bible, make a lot more sense. Right? When you understand the complete difference in values from this culture to us today, you start to understand why things are written the way they are, and why when God just lays waste to an entire tribe that no one bats an eye, and in fact the text acts like it's a good thing. You have to understand the people. You have to understand the culture. You have to understand the history, the timeline, the surrounding cultures and their values. You got to understand these things in order to understand why the Bible is written the way it is. Because obviously for our modern ideas of goodness and ideas of, you know, what is just and right, the fact that slavery is condoned at all in the Bible might seem really, really bad. It might be like, wow, what kind of religion is this that it says that's okay? But when you know the context, when you understand how things were back then, you can actually see that still Judaism's these old laws understanding of slavery was actually really progressive. It was actually like way better than the surrounding areas at the time. It reformed it. It reformed it in such a way that human life was still valued. For example, in the Code of Hammurabi, if you killed a slave, you just had to pay a fine. If you broke property and seriously damaged someone's property, you might get up to the death sentence. The Bible flips that script. The Bible says, okay, well, you already are a slave-owning culture. We see this with Abraham and Sarah, right, with Hagar. Before God entered this picture and even started this covenant, before Judaism officially started in any retrospect, slaves were already a part of Mesopotamian, Chaldean, not Uralic, that's Finland, but that kind of Chaldean, just general Mesopotamian culture. That was part of the culture. It was part of Greek culture. It was part of Roman culture. It was a part of so many different cultures at the time. It doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean it's good. It just means that it was a fact of life. And so when the Hammurabi Code is sitting here saying that slaves are just worth financial recompense, but God is putting down laws that say, no, if you kill a slave, you are also charged with serious sin. You are charged with murder because that slave is a person and you can't treat them as so expendable. When God says that slave has to still rest on the day that you rest and has to be treated well and has to be looked after, that's a departure. That's an improvement from the way slaves were treated by this area, these cultures at this time 2,000 years ago. Again, it sucks that it's there at all, but you can't quite judge back in time like that, because we know things now that people did not know back then, or did not value back then, or did not think the same way of back then. Those are things to keep in mind. Those are things to think about, to consider, to, decide on. And then, of course, comes just the, how do I read this? How do I get through this? How do I do this? Practically, like on a schedule, on a timetable. To which, I'm going to be real with you, I'm kind of getting my ass kicked in that regard myself. I did want to set out reading a bit of Bible every single day of this year. And no doubt, if I had stuck to that, I probably could have been a lot farther right now. There are all kinds of places online that can even give you like a whole schedule, right? Like if you read the Bible every day, read like a couple chapters a day, basically. If we look at this, we'll notice that it actually splits it up pretty decently, where you can spend maybe 30 minutes to maybe an hour every single day just reading through a little bit here and there. And by the end of the year, voila, you've read the whole Bible. Congratulations. Yay, right? Like, that's an option. You could try that. You could try setting aside maybe like before bed, right? Like right before bed, give yourself 30 to 60 minutes to read like a couple chapters and just kind of get through this. And when you do that, like, yes, this is a big book. It's daunting, it's intimidating, but the thing about reading is that if you just keep doing it a little bit, even if you're only doing a few pages a day, eventually, every day that passes, you get more and more read, and you get further and further through it. And so eventually, if you started over here, suddenly you're going to pop your head up and realize, oh wow, I'm actually over here. You might even take pictures of like your bookmark and where it is in the Bible, and take like progress pictures and see how you're progressing each week, and that might help stay motivated and not feel so spooked about this, right? The reason I'm getting my ass kicked is because I have so many other things to read. I am in the process of writing the sequel to this book right now, and that means I'm trying to read 4 entire books a month. And these books are not like simple. They're not like easy reads. So they're definitely ones that make me feel like I did a full like 60 to 90 minute workout, but for my brain. And that means I don't have a lot of energy to be reading this every single day. I kind of started, but with the stuff I'm reading now, I just really don't have that kind of attention. So what I do instead, and what I've been trying to do, I accidentally missed last week, oops. But what I do instead is I just take Sunday, because Sunday, you know, I usually go to church and everything anyway. So Sunday I just try to read one entire chapter of the New Testament, or a good like few chapters, like a good hour's worth of reading of the Old Testament, and then there you go, right? It's a lot more manageable with the New Testament, because eventually, right, as we get into Paul's epistles, which is where I'm about to start Galatians, they get shorter and shorter because they are letters, and they get easier to read and easier to work through, and it just isn't so crazy. So I don't doubt that I'll be done with this soon. But this, again, it's just kind of a little bit at a time, few chapters, and eventually you'll make that progress, right? Just like an hour a week, or whenever you got time, you might have, like, in the car, some empty time, you can listen to audiobooks. There's plenty of audio versions of the Bible. You can do all kinds of stuff like that. But me personally, it makes more sense for my schedule to just do, like, a good reading day, a scripture reading day on, like, a Sunday. That just makes sense, right? And so that's what I like to do, and it also makes it so that, like, you don't get super burned out reading it either, because you're not reading it every single day and, like, kind of making it this thing that you either really look forward to or really don't want to do every day, right? It's just that, like, hey, while we're already in the Jesus mood after church and stuff, there you go, Bible. So if you're saying, oh, I really want to read the Bible, and I just don't know where to start, and I don't know, I'm scared of what I'm going to find in it, and I don't really know, like, what to do, where to go, I hope that this video could answer at least some of those questions. I hope that this could give you some solace that, like, it's, like, serious, because obviously it's God, but it's also not that serious in that, like, you have to read the whole thing, like, today. You know, like, you can take your time with it, digest it, think about it, meditate on it, ask God about it, right? Just kind of process your feelings about it, learn more about the context behind it and everything else, and just enjoy the process of reading and learning is really all I can say. So with all that said, I will see you guys next time for a very, very big topic, because I guess just to give you a heads up, I'm reading this book now after reading Reverend Carla's Deconstruction, and I'm definitely going to put these side by side to see both a pro and anti view on deconstruction as a topic and give some of my thoughts on it. That's a big video that has a lot to do, and I'm kind of dreading having to finish this book because, spoiler, it sucks. It sucks real bad, but we'll talk more about that next time. Until then, I will see you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. See ya!